Well, I could just ask you. I could just ask you a very simple question. Do
Okay.
you know your guidance counselors when you were in school?
No, I did not.
I think it's
But
fair.
I was in school like
Wait,
20 years
Kate,
ago.
same question.
I did.
wait.
I did.
Mint
Okay, so let me ask you
lemonade.
this, Kate.
It be.
Hey, let
Oh,
me ask you this. You said you experienced bullying when you were younger, right?
Don't let him talk over you, Chinchilla. You're the moderator.
yeah. I should
Yeah.
just mute everybody.
Your people
Well,
colonize, your people
I
colonize
should
my
just
people.
mute
It's Black
everybody.
History Month.
No,
Shut your mouth, Power Chinchilla.
I just want to a mint lemonade wanted to say something, so
Sure.
I want to give the space to mint lemonade. So mint lemonade, you wanted to say something about like education overall. So let's go.
Yeah. So I think I get along with like Joel's like 80% what he's saying. I think what's happening now is that instead of teaching the children tools and better ways to cope, we're offloading that and we're just kind of like letting the adults handle it. So instead of teaching kids better way to handle bullying and teaching kids better way to work through their problems, oh, I have a problem, I tell the adult and suspend this kid for 2 days and boom, bullying is taken care of. So
So like come back 2 days later.
No.
Yeah,
No. Nick
something-
wanted to talk. So let's go to Nick.
All right, thank you, sir. I just wanted to bounce this back to Joe Lewis again, really quick. I know we're all getting very tired of him speaking. I'm just kidding, Joe Lewis. I'm just kidding.
How dare you?
Hey!
You got 5 more days, okay? Then you
I'm
can
just curious.
2 seconds. Let's go.
Hey,
Prime's back.
I'm a
Shut up, Chinchilla.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm just curious where what you said conflicts with what I said and what Jonathan Haidt said, because it seems to me like you just gave one example of a way to reduce fragility, like to improve anti-fragility, which is like more incorporate a resource.
I don't necessarily think that the problem is this idea that we have a society that's consistently more fragile than anti-fragile. I think that by and large, we're dealing with a lot of problems at the same time. We're not dealing with, like, I'm just going to talk about children directly here, because it's like in my wheel well. Whereas that we're not doing a good job at exposing children and educating children to how to navigate other children and adults in crisis. 1, 2, we don't give children the proper resources to have open conversations about situations when they are harassed. And 3, especially number 3, we don't do a fantastic job, if at all, of how we have other students interact with and navigate the very systems that we use for reporting these things. Like, we all see the problems that happen with harassment, intimidation, and bullying, where, like, if a student is bullying, then both in certain school policies, both kids are suspended at the same time. And it's like, wait, hang on. Why is the victim being suspended alongside the abuser? Shouldn't there be something else going on? And then they give some type of like meandering excuse about it. And this is something that's in a lot of school board policy across the country, where like if the victim and the abuser get suspended for the equal amount of time pending an investigation, which is something personally I'm not okay with.
So you like mostly disagree with the semantics. That's fair. I can understand that. With that, I'm gonna head off. Have fun, everyone. I just want to decrease the male to female ratio. Goodbye. I love you all. Big hug.
Big love. Kay wanted to say something.
Okay, Kay, and then was it Desperado and Nick? Oh, sorry, Wick. Excuse me.
Joe, I think we've had this conversation before. We've talked about like the difference in school systems, and I think that's kind of where you were going with the did you know your guidance counselor? And I said yes. I feel like it's differentiating between each school district and the area they are. So some school districts do have better opportunities for that. I was able to have guidance counselors. All the school knew when I was bullied. I did go to the resources. Nothing happened. It continued to happen. So I don't think the resources fulfill what they're actually supposed to be there for. You also talked about the idea of like suspending, whether it be both the victim and the abuser in the situation, or just the abuser. And I don't think that suspension is always the best way to do things, because it's basically a vacation from school. Like, and I think you agree with me on that, the way you said no. Like, they get to sit at home for 2 days now. And depending on how their parenting is at home, is if they're actually going to get in trouble at home for it, or they're just going to have a 2-day vacation where they can play video games the entire time. Like, and so that also falls back on the parents. And So I think you put too much emphasis on the school system because it's something you're familiar with and that you deal with on a daily basis. But I think we put too much emphasis on that, and we should be allowing there to be a bigger education, not only within the school and the parents. And I understand there's shitty parents, but I think that's another situation that we need to worry about first and foremost, because they're the first people that are teaching kids shit from 1 to 5. So how are we going to raise kids from 1 to 5, and then all of a sudden once they get to school, now it's up, here you go, school, you deal with it, all the shit I just fucked up on, you fix it now. Like,
well, we kind of, not to cut you off there, Kate, but we kind of offset a lot of the burden of parenting to the public school system, and it'd be kind of naive to suggest otherwise. Like, the school is an encapsulation of a lot of things that parents can't do from 7 a.m. to 3 or 4 setting. Now, I don't think that's what you're saying directly.
There's a lot of things they can also do things at home as well.
Yeah, so we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can recognize that children are still and still have, or let me rephrase this, children still have parents, and parents should have a say in their children's education and how their children are being treated in schools. However, we can also recognize that these are individuals that are going to see their child from a day-to-day longer than that of their parents from 180 days out of the year. And something that I'm sure you'd probably agree with is that there needs to be more of a collaboration where I don't necessarily think it's okay that, and this is kind of like where things kind of, I'll give like an example that might be a bit more clear, because we kind of see like the rub in that, where you have situations where students are in crisis, and then the teacher brings up a concern that, hey, I believe that this child might be in crisis, and I'm not really too sure what to do moving forward. And then it kind of bounces between a bunch of different departments at the same time, depending on who you talk to. And sometimes teachers' hands are completely tied. Like, for one example, in New Jersey, once I report a child in crisis under HIB, it's out of my hands. And that's something that's very, very frustrating, because when you have a student confide in you about a crisis situation, and then you report it to proper authorities, in this case, it would be the superintendent or superintendent's assistant, I cannot have any correspondence with that student anymore around that incident. So
what qualifies as a crisis, Joe, in your
I'm going to peace out, but thanks for having me, Prime.
Have a good one. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
So what qualifies as a crisis?
It would, there's a bunch of signs, but in terms of like intimidation and bullying, there's very like clear parameters. Some of which are, and there's a lot of them, so I'll just like kind of like speed run through some that kind of like matter. Like, the first one is that it has to happen on school property, right? So whatever the incident, and it has to be like one example of it would be like reasonably perceived that's being motivated by any actual or perceived characteristics. That could be like race, color of their skin, ancestry, and natural origin, right? So let's say a student does that, and like, let's say like Pyro is my student, and then he gets, and it's reasonably to perceive that it was motivated by the color of his skin. And then he comes to me, in this case, like a student in crisis would be a student outcrying to that situation. And I think that's a better way of, like, if I answer that question.
Yeah. So that's where, like, I think this kind of speaks to like the fragile culture that we're in. Like, if anyone makes fun of a kid for any reason, if it's based on the medical characteristic, the student is in a crisis. And if anytime a kid gets made fun of, or someone says something derogatory to them, they're being bullied. Like, we're using like but this is where this like fragile culture comes from, because we're calling everything bullying, we're calling everything a student in crisis. So this is where we get this fragile like cancel culture, hyper reactionary because of this type of language.
Mint, I can let me help you. Let me help you a little.
So we'll let Joe. And just kindly, Nat's heard that. Thank you for the 165% raid. Very much appreciate it. Hey, if you're from our chat, you know what's going on, right? So I won't give you a long spiel, but you should follow the channel. If you haven't done so yet, follow this channel, make sure notifications on so you know I'm going live, and hit up my social media and chat !social for our Twitter, our Discord, and our YouTube. So like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff, right? So hit us all up before you head out to bed or whatever, right? Hit that follow button. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so like in Jersey, it's clearly defined, right? So harassment, intimidation, and bullying just means any gesture, written, verbal, or physical, or even electronic communication, where the incident, and you need to have all of these things in certain situations. So it's reasonably perceived, that's based on somebody's actual perceived characteristics, and takes place on school property, schools, or a school-sponsored event, or off school grounds, as like, and then there's like very clear definitions about what it means to be off school grounds, and significantly disrupts or interferes with the orderly operation of the school or rights of other students. And it's reasonable for a person should know under the circumstances that they would have an effect on them physically or emotionally, or damaging the student's property, or placing the student in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm. And then there's also like the other side of that, which is it has an effect of insulting or demeaning any student or group of students, or it creates a hostile educational environment.
Yeah, so I mean, you said exactly what I thought. The crisis encompasses the most like minuscule like grievance, all the way to the hyper extreme of someone like threatening a kid's life. All of those are all fall under a kid's in crisis.
Well,
like that's the problem.
Do you believe that bullying are isolated incidents?
Bullying, no. I wouldn't say bullying would be an isolated incident.
Okay, great. So like the reason why we like, and what's that?
I said, like, what is bullying? Like, this is a question I had, like, early at the start of the open panel that we kind of just glossed over because, like, it seemed like a confusing point. Like, what do we as the panel categorize as bullying?
Yeah, I mean, I describe it as, like, it involves the conduct. I'm just gonna, like, just do the fucking teacher definition. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
like,
but that doesn't mean that's the problem. You're using this teacher definition, like, because we all have like our own definition of what we would consider bullying, like how we it comes.
Well,
but
because
if everyone has to follow.
Could it be?
I'm referring to state law as it influences to schools. So this is a binding definition within the state of New Jersey. So of course I'm going to use the binding definition at the state level. Doesn't. All right. Because that's what. I mean, unless you want to do the moral
I think the
thing.
core issue is what should we consider bullying?
Yes, and in addition to that,
Desperado, I know Desperado has to go soon, so I just want to make sure they get in before they have to leave.
I just wanted to say that, like, Joe Lewis's take is right on point, and it's not just something that happens just in the United States. I've been teaching in Japan for almost 11 years now, and pretty much the exact same inadequacies are in the Japanese system as well as the U.S. system, and that teachers that I have spoken to that have also taught in like Korea and Taiwan, those same inadequacies exist there as well too. That's all I wanted to add to the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably have like an hour conversation about how like bullying manifests in like superiors as well, because then there's really, really shitty guidelines in terms of how students should navigate when they feel like they're being harassed by an educator. Because educators have certain protections, like like teachers unions, like tenure gives like incredible protections to an individual, but that's like a whole other.
So we gotta let some a few other people in. So we gotta let
I actually have to hop off here. So
yeah,
thank
have
you.
A good one.
I'll talk
so
to you
much.
later.
We'll go to Yamato hasn't said anything. Then Steven, right? Anyone else? Wick. Okay.
I can say something. For me, bullying is like a constant harassment of a person on a daily basis, whether it and I can only speak from personal experience because I've been bullied. Being the kid that's been picked on is not a good feeling, where people like point you out in the middle of classroom, they follow you home, try to fight you for no fucking reason at all, and I've seen it happen to other kids as well growing up. It has something for me. I got harassed every day. I got picked on every day. I got like literally beat up every day, just for it simply like looking at just no. Yeah, okay, yeah, that too. Yeah, that too. Like or just like really talking about anime. Group. But what hurt me the most is the people that if they see you doing good in class, they think you're like superior to them, or you think they're smarter. You're smarter than them, and they want to fight you because of that. Trust me, it's not good. I don't think it's isolated. I think it has I don't know. It just doesn't seem isolated to me.
Yeah, I think you and I would probably agree. Like, it's millennials are an interesting bunch in that we were like the last wave, I think, of students and children who got that like old guard approach to these things. And then like you kind of can see it within like Zoomers and stuff like that, where like the tools that they have to handle harassment, intimidation, and bullying are
I wish I
far
had
and away
dude,
better.
dude, bro, I got beat up, and my teacher, one of my teachers, just stood there and was like, "I can report it to the principal, but that's all I can do." But now, like, you have like people doing way more, right? Like way more. Like people are getting called out. Dude, if I had that growing up, I'd probably be a better person.
It moved too, right? Where like something that we're kind of struggling with right now in schools is, when does school conduct stop? So this is gonna like boomer talk, boomer hours. Back in the day, before there was MySpace and social media, most bullying stayed in the confines of the school itself. Now what we're kind of seeing is that
it's traveling to the online space. Yeah, it's follows you to the online space.
Yes, actually, the harm done to children is actually worse now than it used to.
Let's go. Sorry, Yamato, finish up whatever you're talking about, and then we'll go to Steven and then Lick. Right?
I guess I'm done.
Okay. Are you sure? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Steven and Lick.
Sweet. Yeah. I Joe, I guess this is an open question to you and everyone else on the panel, but is it possible that everything that you're speaking to that's present within the education is true, within the education system is true, while also taking into account like the factors that are present at home and the circumstances that shape the child as they're growing up have created an environment that lead that circle? Like if we're looking at a circle right here of like what is worth reporting to a teacher or reporting to someone has grown, and it's grown for better or for worse. So now we are reporting things that wouldn't have been reported if this was 20 years or 20 or 30 years ago. But we're also reporting things as simple as, well, that person, I don't want to paint like a caricature of this, but it's like that person made a comment about my shoes. I felt like that was a microaggression against this, that, or the other. Now I'm going to report that to someone. Like, is it possible that both of those things it's possible that like people are becoming more fragile, but there's also an education system that isn't adequately supporting students in dealing with their trauma? Because it's a question of degree that I feel like is that we're discussing right now.
Sure. I mean, the degree is clearly defined when it comes to even the reporting of the incidences. So, like, you're not going to have a situation where HIB is going to get involved for a student who got harassed because of, like, the shoes that they wear. Obviously, there's going to be a meeting with school officials and, like, why that conduct is poor. But something that I want to make, like, really clear, because it might feel like it might get misrepresented, and that, like, yes, there are report systems for these things, but there's still like a level of escalation, right? Like, so like you're not going to have let me rephrase this. You will have situations where like parents are involved and administration is involved when it comes to like, hey, someone like made fun of me because of my shoes. Now, like, there's levels of context with that too, right? Because like if you like, let's say I as an educator know just from just their information that I have that no one else has. They're like, oh, this is literally the only shoes that they have because of other contextual factors. And then students might know that already and then target that child because of the shoes that they're wearing. Then it's like, okay, there's a level of escalation there. That's why there's like a lot of like reasonable assumptions of like, if we can reasonably assume that a child is being harassed, intimidated, or bullied because of visible or invisible identifiers, then that's when like the escalation bar starts going up.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question properly.
No, you did. Here's a personal example that I think is very relevant. Like growing up in like mixed race contexts, and being very Nigerian, it's so common for people to comment on my nose and my lips. Look how big your lips are. Look how big your nose are. All those different types of comments. Yeah, and it's like, growing up, in a background in an environment where my parents said those things don't matter. What matters is that you grow, you learn, and you stick to what we've taught you, and like remember where you came from. That was kind of functioned as in like a form of insulation from all of those comments that would tear me down. It's not to say that it didn't make me insecure growing up, but it's those types of things that like now it's like make whatever fucking comment you want. But a kid who didn't have that type of social support system growing up, and mind you, like my parents are Nigerian, so like it really are. I grew up in a completely different context than Americans grow up in. They grow up in a household where everyone it's like it's like the social discourse is around self-love and accepting everyone for exactly how they are and never pick on anyone for any different type of characteristic they might have, and the very acknowledgement of something that might seem funny to you is now mean, rude, and it needs to be canceled outright. You see, now you can see that there becomes the potential for a culture that has a kid who's 13 years old who grew up exactly like me, looks like me, but his parents weren't really there to say like, hey, it's okay, like you don't need to worry about those things, and like or better yet, let's talk about it. They don't have that conversation at home, so then they go to school and it's like, why is everyone picking on me? And then they get super protective. And you can see where like the potential for a kid who's very fragile arises, and if they don't
Can I
have the
ask a
education
question?
system. Sure. Sorry.
Why do we assume that they wouldn't be talking about it at home, especially if we're like talking about kids? Like, why do we assume that this would be something that is like an adult therapy session where you go to that shit and then like you just keep it to yourself? Because like when I had to do this shit, like I did, yeah, like when I had to do this shit, like my parent was a big part of like setting up the meetings and the times in my schedule where it would be okay. Is like, well, no, he needs a little bit more extra math time, so like pull him during English. He has good grades in English. I know he'll bounce back. Like my parent was heavily involved in that stuff, and then like I did talk to my parent afterwards and that, and like I understand that you do not come from an American background, so like I
Sure.
like
Well,
I know that like that's something that a
no,
lot of kids do.
I guess
Yeah, so something.
if I may just really quickly just to
Yeah.
address what Pyro was saying was like I know it might sound like a poor assumption to make, but I think we might all kind of agree, like, you kind of live in a crumbling infrastructure. And I feel like in America, it's probably safer to assume that people don't have parents as uplifting and supportive as you, Pyro. So they're not having those conversations at home. They might not be coming into school to address those things that are happening in school. And now it's kind of just offloaded onto the
Oh
school
no,
and kids aren't getting
well,
this.
when I say like have those conversations, I don't mean like extra shit like coming into school and dealing with the problem, talking to the principal. I mean just like the basic sit down, like the 2-minute explanation you just gave me of like I'm sure what must have been like a more extensive conversation of like, yeah, no, these things don't mean anything. Like you be who you are. That's the shit I got. That's like the conversations I got. So like I can understand where it's like a kid might come home and tell their parents about some stuff like that. They might not get like the full, loving, embracing experience. And I definitely understand what you're saying there, but like the idea that they wouldn't at least tell their parents about some of it. Now it's down to the parents on what they do. But like
Well, I'm not saying
I
they
would
wouldn't
imagine
tell
like
them.
kids
I guess it's just bringing this conversation full circle. It's kind of like how we start off this conversation about like we live in in a society where it's like I think it was Nick who mentioned that book that Jonathan Haidt had written called The Coddling of the American Mind. It's where it's like you get a trophy even if you get 8th place. And it's like, we're here for you, baby. We got everything, like you're a superstar, right? It's like it's almost like an overemphasis on you've got it. No one's gonna hurt you. We're here for you. This, that, the other. Meanwhile, when you enter into the world, like people are gonna say some harsh shit because, I mean, hurt people, and it's like that. It's like I feel like there's not really an understanding of that at scale within American society, and I don't think it's something that's taught to adolescents. Is that like people are gonna say some fucked up shit to you, and it's not a matter of just passively accepting it. Do something about it, but also like the world's not gonna
there's.
I
change
think you
because
can
of you.
I think you can change the way that you internalize it and how you react to it. Like, yes, you can have your emotions about it, but you don't need to like go home and cry about it every day. Like, you can realize that one day, like, it just doesn't fucking matter. Like Pyro said, that his parents said this shit doesn't matter to you. Like, it's not like you can have that moment. People can still bully you. They can still say hurtful things and criticize things about you, but you can still be like, at some point it's going to hurt you, and then you're going to learn to cope with it and go, all right, I don't care what you have to say. Like,
well, something that you knocked on, Steven, that I kind of want to address is that because I can kind of take your, I understand, I don't want to say take your anecdote and load it with another one, but I think let me just say it. So like, I had a student who was a devout Muslim, and when he turned 18 during the summer, and he grew his beard out, and his whole family is devout. Like, there was just a thing that you had to do, and he got deeply harassed because of his beard, so much so that and the thing is that like, we as a staff didn't know about it because nobody said anything to us, and we found out because during senior night he got a razor for a senior gift, and then he flipped out and beat the shit out of this freshman, and we're like, what the fuck is going on? And then what we learned is that this freshman, from the summer all the way up until senior night, that he was getting bullied by this kid every day. And then what was so like surreal was we were sitting there as a staff, and this got serious. Like, superintendent got involved, our supervisor got involved, and then like the guidance counselor basically asked us straight up, like, why wasn't any of this reported? And he dropped receipts, text messages, all, like, they sent in pictures of bin Laden. It was bad. And then like after the fact, because like this is like we're years separated now, and this like student is now my colleague, and like something that he told me very candidly was that like, I didn't know who to talk to about this because there was nobody within the circle like that I think could understand about this. And it kind of like really blew me back when I first like started getting the teaching. And I think that sometimes that you can have situations where the home structure might not be the best environment. And this might be something that Power was saying, that the home environment might not be the best place to actually have this like complicated conversation. While at the same time, like, this is why things like culturally responsive teaching and stuff like that are so important, because like you don't want to create a situation, and there's like a bunch of things. So you don't want to create a situation where like one of your students is getting overtly harassed by a bunch of other students and nobody's doing anything, you know? Because that's really what happened. And like we essentially facilitated. Yeah,
he's been waiting patiently.
Sure. Oh, semi-patiently. So there are a lot has been brought up that I'd like to address, but I want to stick to a couple things. Joe, you mentioned something earlier that's absolutely true. Now, bullying, actually the women, especially young girls, are harming themselves more than they have ever before because they have no escape from bullying. Back in my day, when you were done with school, you were done with school. You didn't see anyone unless you invited your friends over. You know what I mean? Now, you cannot escape the bullying because we're all connected on social media, all on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. They are subject to constant bullying. There is no off-ramp. There is no way to get away from it. They are targeted and they are harassed more and more. And especially young women, but also young men, are just not able to deal with it. So while we may have better resources now, they are not up to the task at hand. They are failing our children. Not that I have children, but you know what I mean. So I do want to say that, again, I go back to my original point. We have to do all we can as a society. Yes, that's true. But we cannot stop there. We have to, as well, give individuals the tools so when they are bullied and no one knows about it for whatever reason, or worse, when they tell people about it and people ignore them, they have to have some way to deal with that, because otherwise they're going to break and crumble and, as you just said, beat the shit out of someone. When I was growing up, now you also said something else I want to address really quick. You said that you don't believe that the victim and the abuser should both be suspended. And I would agree with you in theory, but in practice, I don't think that's practical. I'll give you an example. So when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, there was a bully there who was very clever about how he did it. He would pick on someone, and I watched this happen. He would pick on someone, get his cronies to pick on someone, but he wouldn't do it in where anyone could see. And then he would bait them into just popping off and going crazy and just beating someone or mouthing off, using slurs against someone in a classroom, and they got in trouble. And so when you talk about who is the victim and who is the abuser, it's not always clear. In cases where it is, I would agree with you, but that's not always so clear cut, I would say.
Yeah, and this is why, like, and this is like, again, like, I push back on different content creators about this thing, where it's, how do we make sure, and this is gonna sound pretty yikesy, but how do we make sure that victims and alleged offenders are protected, in so that their educational environment and their educational process that they have a right to is not disrupted? And there's no correct answer. Like, on one hand, because like we saw this in Loudon, where it's like, okay, this kid is alleged. I hate to use this, invoke this again. Like I talk about this all the fucking time. They can't stop, won't stop. Like, we can recognize that a child was allegedly suspected of sexually assaulted a student, but they haven't gone through the legal process, and they have no prior instances of this happening. And then if you're a Department of Education, or like, let's say like a school board, it's like, okay, what do we do? And obviously you're like negotiating with a bunch of people, and then they determined that like they transferred the kid to a different school, put him on an ankle monitor, and then he sexually assaulted a student again. And then everyone's like, well, what the fuck? Like, why did you let this student go to another school just to do it again? It's like, whoa, hang on. Like, they were never convicted of anything or charged with anything. And the process for this is super fast. And like, I think we're better, or should be, better now, because there has been an expansion of virtual learning. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if you separate two students and put them virtual, that essentially is targeting them in a sense. Like, you're not like, you're going to deduce that like, oh, why are they out? Oh, well, these are the two people involved in this. It's like not a perfect science.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It's not a perfect science, and it's not something that I think can ever be fully solved. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point, and maybe this is me being doomer pilled. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But we're never going to get to a point where there is never bullying, that there is never harassment. I hope we do. I hope we get as close as we can. But being that is my real honest belief, being that that's never going to happen, we have to focus on the only thing that people can control is themselves. And the only thing that you can do in certain situations, if you report it and it's not dealt with, if you've done all you can to get people to recognize the situation and they just aren't, unless you have the tools to deal with it, it's going to break you. So I just don't understand, like, I don't know. It always feels like we push back against this, and I can see it in chat, and I can see it in other places, that anytime someone suggests, hey, we do need to learn coping mechanisms, then they're like, oh, you're victim blaming, you're justifying abuse. That's not it at all. And I just don't. Can you help me bridge? I'm pleading with you. Help me bridge this.
I understand what you're saying, Wick, and my problem is, and I'm coming at you good faith, you know, like we chill. I'm hopping on your panels this week and shit. Like,
yeah, you are.
One of my big problems when I hear people go about that route is because when they're confronted about it, when they're confronted with someone who's dealt with the bullying or the trauma that we're talking about, y'all dudes, the people who spit that shit, have no answer. Like, like, how do you actually give, like, cool, you want to be like, yo, you gotta just, you know, deal with it. But like, when they come and be like, yo, I need help, I desperately need help, I'm at the end of my wits, you know, I'm at the, you know, in Minecraft point, like, what do I do? And then y'all are just like, like, that for me is a problem. And I've seen that happen so many times in school with children that it's fucking ridiculous.
Can I reinforce something Pyro, to and like I'm curious in respond. I think the rub is, and maybe this is me because I'm on this anarchism arc. Baby and I are gonna be friends. Oh, like
Oh no!
I think one of my
Unholy
one of my concerns is that I think we need to have or recognize that there needs to be a responsibility of self, but also a responsibility of institutions. And I think something that tends to happen is that we prioritize the individual so much sometimes, where we kind of just like believe that the institution is just like too rotten and cannot be fixed. So it's like, while I understand that, yeah, like to like tough, like listen, if I call you a white boy, cope and seethe. But at the same time, like we can recognize like, okay, these certain things are not like okay, and we have to make sure that the institutions that are responsible to like to create a culture of these things.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's a reasonable take. I think that yes, as to the extent that we can improve our institutions, because we can. There are definitely things we can do to make our reporting systems better, to make how we handle when people come to us with these problems better. And like Pyro was saying as well, you have to be able to at least listen, because I'm not a trained counselor, and if one of my friends came to me with some trauma, yes, I should tell them to go to a counselor. Absolutely. I should get them the help they need. But also being able to listen to them and to accept them and to tell them it's not your fault is very important. That said,
and then like also there's two, like we don't really do, unless like of rehashing my previous point, is that we don't really do a good job at like giving people the tools to navigate when you're hit with things that are beyond your purview.
Yes.
Like one of the things that like really like shook me was when my friend like literally murdered another one of my friends, and then he just dropped it in a group chat, and then we're just like, and then we made another. And what crazy this about me was because I immediately called 911, but then as I'm on the phone with the police, there's another group chat saying, hey, we should probably report this, right? And I'm like, I'm already on the phone. What the fuck are you guys doing?
But that goes to my point, right? But doesn't that go to my point that we don't give people the tools to handle these situations, whether it be their own situations or other situations? We just don't. We expect them to automatically know, or we expect them to just, somehow pull it from the ether, or maybe read a Twitter take to tell you what to do. That's a bad idea, by the way. And if anyone's listening to anyone on Twitch for counseling or advice, don't do it. But at the same time, this is going to happen. I've had friends come up to me and needing help, needing real help. And that's a good thing. We have to teach people to go to others for help, because there's this idea that we can't for some reason. But we should be able to. And helping people realize that it's okay to seek help is exactly what I'm talking about when I say we need to give people the tools to deal with trauma. That's not telling them to toughen up.
Subscribe. This is why you need to subscribe to Healthy Gamer, okay? Listen, for the low price.
Oh, shit. Okay. No, but I'm not. Nope. But you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Is this making sense?
Yes. Total sense.
So,
okay.
Okay.